Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The price of oil. The price of oil is what you see at the gas pump, and we'll see at the gas pump this week, tomorrow, next week. The price of oil is not going down. The price of gasoline is not going down. You're hearing me state to state, nation to nation. I tell you, fill the tank tonight. I told you to fill it last night. I'll tell you to fill it the night before, because those prices are not coming back for a while. The price of oil is about the unknowns of the Maghreb, the 5 states of North Africa, the air attack near the oil facility in Libya today, the doubts about the Arabian Peninsula, the Persian Gulf. We'll talk about all of that tonight. But there's a larger story here that is apparent if you are in the Middle Kingdom, East Asia, the all-powerful China. It's called the Jasmine Revolution, and every ripple in the news cycle that you see right now is very much watched in Beijing. Beijing fears what's going on in the Maghreb. Beijing fears stories about Tunis and stories about Tripoli and stories about Cairo, especially stories about Bahrain, where people are very well-to-do and are still rising up against an autocrat, Al-Khalifa. The Jasmine Revolution. To help me tell this story is Mary Kissel, who joins me in studio tonight, and I welcome Mary after several years of talking to her on the telephone in Hong Kong. She's now based at the Wall Street Journal in New York. Mary, a very good evening and welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me, John.
You come here, Mary, and all heck breaks loose in Asia. All right, that was a smart move on your part. What is the Jasmine Revolution to the Beijing cadres, to the authorities in charge of the People's Republic?
The Jasmine Revolution, John, is the first time since 1989 that we've seen any sort of attempt at an organized protest in China. It was posted outside of China on a website that was North Carolina-based, but it is having resonance back home. And the reason it is so threatening to the Chinese leaders is because they can't win. If they crack down, they legitimize the protests. If they let them stand, then the Chinese people understand that they have individual power, and that is what the Communist Revolution tried to wipe out. Right,
so what we have here is a symbol that was picked up, sort of helter-skelter out of the Maghreb. Maybe it came from Tunis, maybe it came from Cairo. The jasmine flower is commonplace around the world. There are many jasmines blooming in the springtime in China, and I'm told from your colleague Matt Kaminsky at the Wall Street Journal, whom I'll talk to eventually, that the jasmine flower has such a wonderful scent, people carry it with them in the streets in China, and it offsets some of the odors of the street, but that the authorities can't decide whether they want to confiscate those jasmines, whether they want to punish people carrying them. It's a bit like, Mary, I was taught in seminary once upon a time, that in early Christianity, one of the ways you signaled to someone else that you were a Christian, and it was suppressed and brutalized by the Roman masters, was you drew the symbol of the fish on an open hand. And carrying the jasmine in China is heading to becoming that. Your measure, Mary, you were 6 years in Asia. Is it that powerful? Is an idea strong enough to upset what is now a 60-year-old brutal autocracy?
Eventually it will be. The question is it going to happen in the next month or the next year? I think what recent events have shown us is just how successfully China has suppressed information of this revolution and controlled the internet, not just through the party, but because they've co-opted the internet and communications companies in China to do it for them.
We'll talk about that, but I note that if your name is John Huntsman, you can't be found in the internet search engines in China. Mary, it's not just China. I don't want to export trouble, because what is happening now with the price of oil is not just inflationary for the food and fuel prices in China. That causes the cadres a lot of trouble, and devil take the hindmost, guys, but it's here in the United States as well. Our economy's not strong. We are in a recovery mode. Jobs are going to increase. We think we're going to get a good jobs number on Friday. But the price of gasoline is now a threat. How's the Obama administration responding to it so far in your measure?
Not very well.
That's the correct answer. Yes.
Not very well.
Yes. No answer. No response whatsoever.
No response whatsoever. But you know, the key here, of course, is the cheapening of our currency,
right,
and the inflation that is creating. Will that create in the United States, but around the world. And I think you're seeing it in commodity prices. You're seeing it in, I think, some asset prices like agricultural land, which has just gone, price of which has just gone through the roof. You're seeing it in emerging markets. You're seeing it everywhere.
Mary, hit the right word here, because the little birdie's just coming down to the studio, and we've gone to crude on the Brent crude to 116.77. I was told a couple of weeks ago that's a one-way trade to 120, and at 140, Europe's in trouble if it's sustained. But Mary, look at the price of gold. Look at the price of wheat. Look at the price of soybeans. All of these inflationary events. Are they Ben Bernanke, or should we blame them on Gaddafi?
Well, it's hard to know exactly how much, but since we run the world's global currency, and the vast majority of global trade is denominated in dollars, there has to be some effect.
But the chairman of the Federal Reserve told me personally yesterday, when he was on Capitol Hill, that gasoline was not a problem, that inflation was not a problem. He had it well in hand, and QE2 goes forward. Didn't he say that yesterday?
Yeah, and we had one of his colleagues on the FOMC into the editorial page today that took, well, shall we say, slightly disagreed with him on that.
Right. Your colleague George Malone disagreed with him too. He says that every time the Federal Reserve tries to monetize the debt, which is what's going on right now. Explain that, Mary. What does that mean?
Monetize the debt, meaning inflating it away.
Right. So the debt is worth less because the dollar's worth less. Every time that happens, let me see, the convergence in history, 1979, did anything happen? 1989, did anything happen? In fact, I'm sure that every time there's been an inflationary bubble, at least in terms of food and fuel, it's led to turmoil in the street. And George Malone will go so far as to say, ask the question, is Tunis, is Tripoli, is Cairo about the inflation for food and fuel prices for people in the street?
Well, it certainly played a role, and we know that inflation played a role in Tiananmen Square in 1989.
Now, again, we're not going to export the trouble. It's here. Mary and the editorial board are very concerned with a program you haven't much heard of because it's a total failure. But it's an aspect of the stimulation that we've received from the Obama administration. Can we call these the super Keynesians, the idea that you can print enough money to get out of trouble? And once upon a time, they had a program called HAMP. What is HAMP, Mary?
The Home Affordable Mortgage Program,
Right.
if I'm remembering that correctly.
Right, and that was for people who were in trouble. They could apply, gather all their paperwork, go to Uncle Sam, and get help with their mortgage, a reduction or some extension of their mortgage payments. The report that I had from your colleague Louise Radnofsky a few nights ago from the Wall Street Journal is that the program was targeted to spend $75 billion to help Americans. In Florida, in California, it spent $1 billion because the paperwork is in such disrepair. So the Obama administration, having failed under its own rules, has now a better idea. What is it, Mary?
Well, it's effectively the same idea. It's how do we keep people who can't afford their homes in their homes?
And what are they going to do?
They want to bleed the banks to the tune of $20 billion. So the servicers of these mortgages, which are the banks, which, by the way, may or may not have anything to do with originating the loans,
Right.
and has nothing to do with the investors who have bought these mortgages, they're going to squeeze the banks for money and dole it out to keep more people who can't afford their homes in their homes.
And why does that inhibit the economy's recovery, Mary? How does this translate to all of us, to hiring, to GDP growth, to everything we're seeing in the economy?
Well, a couple things, because number one, a lot of Americans' wealth is in their homes, in the equity in their homes, and so you need the housing market to clear. And when I say to clear, that means that people who can't afford the homes need to be booted out of them. They need to be foreclosed on,
Right.
and those homes need to be turned over, and we need to find a bottom in price in the housing market. The second reason that it's important is because people need to be able to move to find jobs, and if you can't get out of your home, you can't move.